Hey guys, Mary Rose here. It's nice to see you. I'm excited to be going live again for our second weekly live stream with me and Path of the Storyteller, where we're going to talk about writing. I'm going to share with you some of my hard-earned wisdom over many decades of doing this gig. And I really want to answer your questions too. So those of you who are here live, please don't be shy about asking. As you can see, we have a little banner down below. If you're watching from Facebook, you might be on YouTube, you might be on Facebook. If you're watching from Facebook, you can give permission to StreamYard, the streaming platform, to let me know who's asking a question just by going to that little link that you see below. And if you don't do that, you can still ask questions, but you'll be anonymous. So you can, you'll show up as anonymous. You could just type your name so I know who it is. You know, that awkward moment when you're at a party and somebody you know comes up to you and you can't place their name and you're like, oh, hi, you know, I don't want you to have that feeling. If I talk to you, but I don't call you by name, you know, it's because I can't see who you are if you're coming in from Facebook. Okay. So that's StreamYard.com/Facebook. You click it, you say it's okay to show my name, and then that's done. It's all taken care of. So I'm going to put that away for now because I know you guys got it. Your quick studies. So our topic today is revision. And it's not just revision. It's revision, revision, revision. It's so nice they named it 3 times. And 3 times, I'm here to tell you, does not even come close, to the amount of times you are going to go over your work. Now, here's the thing. Some writers, and let me know in the comments if this is you, let me know. Some writers secretly think, or maybe not so secretly, think that if they were good, quote, good, if they were talented, if, you know, the universe really intended them to be writers, that their first drafts would be ready, would be done, that they would sort of sit down and, you know, type away or scribble away and it would all work. You know, it would just all be ready to go to press, ready to be bound between hardcovers. Now, why on earth would we get an idea like that in our heads? Why? All you've ever heard since the minute you started writing and talking to people about writing is there is no writing, there is only rewriting. And still, in our secret hearts, we want to be the exception to that rule. Okay? Now, so if you feel seen by that, I see you, right? I see you. We all have moments like this. Where do we get this madcap idea that we should be the ones that can just spew finished work onto the page? I'll tell you where I think it comes from. I mean, some of us are perfectionists by nature or by training or, you know, some accident of brain chemistry. We just tend to be perfectionists. We're very hard on ourselves. We're very uncomfortable with being seen as imperfect or doing things that are messy, you know, being seen in our vulnerability and in our flaws. And writing is so personal. We know this, right? You know, when we write, it feels like us in a way that is kind of remarkable. And it's a universal issue for writers because it just feels like we're putting our inner monologue, our sense of self, our consciousness on the page, which in a way we are. So it feels personal. So when the writing is imperfect, we feel imperfect. If that makes us uncomfortable, and let's be honest, for most of us, it does make us uncomfortable, right? It becomes a judgment on our work, on our capacity to do the work. But here's the thing. Writing is a funny practice, you know. You can watch somebody else practice the violin and you can hear, right, that they're working on a little piece at a time, or you can hear if someone is a student early in their training that it doesn't sound that good, you know, but you get that. It's visible. The process of learning is visible. We don't really get to watch other people write. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. We want to learn to do something with mastery. We want to be good at it. But we never really get the chance to watch a master do it. All we ever get the chance to watch is the finished product of the writers we admire. That's what we get to see. We don't get to see them do it. And all of the, photographs of the great writers, sitting at their typewriters, it doesn't help, because in order to watch them do it, we would have to get, we'd have to be in their brains. We'd have to be in the process of them writing. Even if we could watch them typing, right? We still wouldn't really get to watch them do it. So how can we learn how to do it when we never get to see what the process looks like? It's a question, that we can answer. We can explore that question. But the fact that we can't watch them do it, we can't watch practiced, seasoned writers do it, we are left to form our own confused version of what the process must be like simply by looking at the finished product. Now, the finished product looks amazing, right? The finished product has been revised, it's been edited, it's been designed, it's been typeset, maybe it's been illustrated, it's been bound in hard covers, maybe it's got decollage paper and a little ribbon running down the middle. I mean, you can see what kind of books I really dig. It looks amazing, right? It does not look like a bunch of half-built sandcastles, right? It doesn't look like mud. It doesn't look like a mess. It doesn't look like splatters of paint on canvases, stacked all over the room. It just looks finished. It looks perfect. It looks inevitable. The better the book is, the more it's going to have that sense of, it doesn't even feel like anybody wrote it. It feels like it just kind of fell from the sky in this beautiful state of perfection. And that's going to endure for centuries. Did it start out that way? Well, I'm here to tell you that it did not. It did not. It started out, with a thread, with just like a murmur of an idea, a character that somebody thought of, an idea for a title, something they observed in real life that made them think. It started out with the tiniest little impulse, and it was painstakingly built through draft after draft after draft. It may have taken multiple drafts to get to the place where there's even a story that makes sense, to discover who the cast of characters are, what the story is about, where in this particular writer's psyche this story was coming from, the theme, if you will. Like, what is the authentic emotional tug of this story? You sometimes have to bushwhack your way through a lot of exploratory writing just to get to that place. So even your first draft is unlikely to be a first draft. It's likely to be the result of a lot of exploratory writing. As we say, a path of the storyteller. And if my students are out there, this is true. Messy mud pies. Writing is messy. Finished books are very clean. We don't want them to get dirty, right? But writing is messy. So we have to be willing, right? We have to be willing to just make a lot of mess, be very imperfect, and deal with the uncertainty of not always knowing what we're doing, of not knowing where we're going. Now, it's not that we don't have a map. We do have a map. And I'm a big fan of story structure. The more we get to know each other, the more you're going to learn this about me. Story structure is like the life preserver. It is the thing that we can always go back to for safety. The more we have a grasp of structure, the freer we are to be exploratory in our drafting, because we know that there is a shape, there is a container, there is a craft, a discipline that we can apply to the stuff we create and, coax it into the shape of story, right? So that is always there waiting for us. But the freedom to be messy is essential, otherwise we're not going to get there. So what are the odds, right, that you're going to, even if you kind of messy mud pie your way to a first draft, and you have good story structure, craft, the odds of your first draft getting all of that right at the same time are sort of nil, and so here's the other thing. My first point, we have this kind of mistaken notion of what the writing process is like. We think it is shorter and cleaner than it really is, and we also think that we might be the exception to the rule, that revision is the key. And so that's one point. But here's the other thing. Writing requires a lot of different skill sets, right? We are making up a story or telling a story if we're working with true material. Maybe we're working in a form of memoir. But if we're writing fiction, we're making it up. So we have this primary task of sorting out what the story is. That is a task that is both deeply personal and psychological, and involves a lot of architecture. So we have to be able to kind of open our hearts and tell a story that is about something. My message to you always is that a story is about transformation. It depicts a journey of change of a primary character that impacts ultimately the larger environment. So it is a journey of transformation that is propelled by forces of opposition, just as it is in life. You'll hear me talk about this a lot. That in and of itself is a lot to work out. It may take a lot of work just to make sure that the architecture of the storytelling is right. That's only the first half of the work, because in order to then transmit this beautifully designed story of transformation into the mind of your reader, you have to translate into words. That's the magic chariot, right? Is language. We're writers. Language is what we use. If we were painters, we might use oil paints. We might use watercolors. If we were sculptors, we might use chunks of marble. We're writers. We use words. Guess what? It's a great material. It's cheap. It's portable, right? It's endlessly malleable. We don't have to worry about, I got to get it right before the paint dries. We can go back and keep refining, keep changing, keep, making it closer to our vision. So we're very lucky in that regard. But when we have to put it into words, we have a whole new set of tasks, and in a way, a whole new set of writing craft that we have to apply, because this architecture is like, that's the engineer part of our brain. But then when we get into the language, we have to be poets. So as I say, we have to be poets and engineers in order to write successfully, but we don't have to be those things at the same time. And if you think about the different parts of our brains that those tasks use, you'll see how unrealistic it is to assume that we might be able to somehow tell a story, find the voice, get the sentences right, channel the most succinct and witty dialogue, create figurative language that, makes our readers swoon, invent all the details of setting and sensory information that bring the story to life in the mind of the reader. You see what I'm saying? There's just a lot of things on the to-do list. We don't have to do them all at once. And it's a good thing, because I don't know anyone who could do them all at once, right? So when we revise, if we have some craft, if we have some training, if we have a way of working, we're not trying to write the whole book all at once and then revise the whole book all at once. That it takes away the advantage of the revision process. What we can do is we can seek to focus our attention on one aspect of the book at a time. And we can do multiple revisions, each one designed to fix, one aspect. So we're going to do multiple drafts to get the story straight, beginning, middle, end. Are there proportions right? Is the beginning, kind of a tight 20-25% of the book? Is the middle well structured so that it's not just wandering around looking for the next incident, but instead a kind of beautifully designed series of escalating tests that help our protagonist grow and change, right? As they move toward who they're going to be at the end of the story, that promised transformation that the reader is so part of, so identified with. You know, does it culminate in some kind of magnificent ordeal that puts the hero to the test and then spin the story in an unexpected direction when things don't go as planned, thus giving us a third act in which to kind of deepen and widen the story, reveal the themes, you know, give us that expansive feeling that a great ending gives the reader when it's everything feels surprising and everything feels inevitable, and you close that book and you hug it to your chest, and like the next thing that you want to do is either call a friend and say you have to read this, or go back to the beginning and start reading it again. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident, that experience for the reader. That's like that's a beautiful story structure that delivers that experience. Great. How many drafts does it take to get that? Then the language. Have you omitted all the needless words? Have you provided enough of a steady stream of detail that keeps the story like alive in the mind of the reader, that creates almost one of the phrases I use in our training in Path of the Storyteller is the reader has to be given enough to hand over the keys of their brain to you. And you all know what that feels like, right? When you're really engrossed in reading, somebody can speak to you and you won't hear them. If you're on a train or a bus, you will miss your stop if you're at an exciting part of the book. So your own sense, the reader's own sensory world gets put on the back burner, and the sensory world of the book is given charge. That's what's driving the brain, right? It's an incredible thing to be able to do. It's like a profound kind of hypnosis. So that's achieved by the writer being very meticulous in keeping that dream alive all throughout. And there's, all kinds of writing craft tips, techniques, and tricks that we do to achieve that. It's not a simple thing. It's no simple thing. You have to give the reader what they need to keep that dream going. And you also have to have the discipline to remove the kind of speed bumps that'll wake them up from the dream. So it's a lot of different aspects of writing craft involved. You're not going to do them all at once, but that's good news because you don't have to. You have this great malleable material, right? Language. You can do anything with it. You can take pieces out. You can put pieces back. You can shift it around. You can put things in a different order. Nobody gets hurt, right? Nobody gets hurt when you do that. It's incredible. If you make a mistake as a sculptor and you hit it the wrong way and the whole block of marble falls apart, you're out of luck. You got to start over. We don't have that limitation. So what I encourage everybody to do is to really look at process and revision as one of the things that makes us so lucky to be writers. It's one of the things that makes it so easy to get your work really, really good. You don't have to settle for an unpolished, unrevised draft. You can take the time to make your work really, really good. And the obstacles that stand in your way are going to be your opinions about the process of revision, your opinions about about finishing, keeping the consistency of practice to finish what you start, even when you can see that it's going to need a lot more work. You need patience, and you need the ability to kind of put aside your self-judgment. Now, you probably need one more thing as well, right? And I can see a couple of great comments just came in. I'm going to deal with those in a second. Let me finish this one thought. The other thing that you need is that you need to know what to fix. And now that sounds kind of simplistic, but if you don't have a good grasp of writing craft, you are going to be helpless in the face of the mess you've made, right? You're like, oh, great. I did what Mary Rose said. I made a messy mud pie. I have a big sloppy first draft. I don't know what to do. I know it needs work. I just don't know what to do. And this, my friends, is when we have to acknowledge that we cannot learn to write like the masters by ear. We cannot learn to do it that way. It's not sufficient, you know. It's also not it's not fun, it's exhausting, right? To teach yourself to do something simply by looking at the product and not really examining the process is it's so you talk about imposter syndrome, right? It's like you're not going to really know if you're doing it right. You never sat in the brain of your favorite writer as they were writing. None of us have. So we don't know how they got the results that they got. We don't know how they approached revision. But but taken collectively, we can see what makes good work good. There have been many, many people who've gone to a great deal of trouble to study this very question, to examine what makes good work good. And I'm talking about like going back to Aristotle in his Poetics. Is it's in an attempt to answer this question. When I go and I see one of the tragedies in the big theater, I see the audience going nuts. I see them gasping, when Oedipus reveals his terrible mistake. I see them laughing at the comedies. I see what the power that the work has. How is, what sorcery is this? How do the playwrights do it? What makes good work good? This is a question that we actually have a lot of information about. We have a lot of technique. And this, when I say writing craft, this is what I mean. Most of us feel that since we read a lot and we read well, we can take our writing to a certain level just by ear, but it hits a ceiling. It gets to a certain point when if we don't take the time to study writing craft, we are not going to be able to get past our own limitations. It's going to sort of sound okay to us, but then in our heart of hearts, we know it's not as good as the books that we think are fantastic. So how do you revise? If you have trouble revising, I want you to think about where you've gotten your framework for writing craft. Where did you learn to do it? What is on your checklist? What things do you look for? And if you don't have a lot of specifics, then that is something to really pursue. That's something to really dig into. Now, let me look at some of the comments and questions that have come in. All right. I revise as I go, says my friend, a Facebook user. If you are a friend, I wave at you, but you're a friend now. I revise as I go. Here, we'll put it up. And I suspect it's an avoidance technique, but I don't want to continue if I hate what I've done so far. Oh, relatable friend, Facebook user. I revise as I go, and I suspect it's an avoidance technique, but I don't want to continue if I hate what I've done so far. So much of our job as a writer is balancing the consistent practice of doing the work with the mental chatter, the anxiety of judging the work that we're doing. That is so much of our job. I have to say that I think there's a sense in which people who succeed as writers are the ones who are most able to navigate that difficult emotional state. We have to learn to navigate our anxiety about the work, right? When you're avoiding something, what are you avoiding? That's anxiety. I'm avoiding it. I'm phobic about it, right? I'm trying to keep it at bay, keep it far away from me. So when you revise as you go, because you can see that the work that you have is such a mess that it causes your level of anxiety to get to the breaking point that it's like, I don't even want to continue because I'm not in love with what I've done. I think that there is a beautiful sweet spot between an avoidance technique which is not helpful, and managing your comfort zone, which is a good thing. You have to know how much of a mess you can stand. Some of us need an orderly desk. Some of us can work in chaos. This is a temperamental thing. There's no right or wrong about it. There is going to be always a certain level of imperfection, chaos, messy mud pie quality to the work. And you have to figure out what you can stand. and keep going. So I want to applaud your self-knowledge, because you can revise as you go to a certain point, but do not let it stop you. Because if the bar that you set for yourself is, I'm going to revise as I go until it's perfect, and then I'm going to let myself move on, that's an avoidance technique. You don't need me to tell you that. You've taken it too far. But if you need a certain amount of like feeling good about what I've done, get it to that level so that you can go on. But just know that, you can work in stages. Here's a tip. This is something I want you to try. You can work in stages where maybe I wrote the first chapter and I started to get to know my main character. It was kind of a mess. And I worked on it and I worked on it and worked on it. Now I feel good about it. And now I'm going to move to the second chapter. Instead of making a hard break, like say, okay, I wrote a first draft of the first chapter and it's kind of a mess. And I think I know what happens next. So make some like really messy notes for the second chapter. Go back and polish up your first chapter, but then make yourself work on the second chapter too, right? So the first chapter is going to get better and better while the second chapter is still messy. And then you're going to do the same thing. Like you're going to make, okay, well, the first chapter is good enough for now. The second chapter, I'm going to bring it up to a level, but I'm going to start working on the third chapter as well. What I don't want you to do is draw a line where this is perfect and this is blank, because that's when writers get stuck. They have like, I've got 3 perfect chapters, but then I don't know what happens next. I've heard this a million times. It's like, all right, while you're revising those chapters, make sure you're pushing forward. Like just keep pushing forward in the imperfect way. Trick yourself, make a deal with yourself. We have to make a lot of bargains with our own brain sometimes as writers to keep going. So that's one that you can do. Let me see what else we have. Yeah. So my student Angelica shares, it's one thing to know, and it's another thing to entirely believe. And I'm going to guess, Angelica, let me know if I'm wrong, that what you're referring to here is the knowledge, right? The knowledge that you are not the exception to the rule, that you are not the one who's going to spit out that perfect first draft, that you too, just like everybody else in this crazy game of writing, are going to have to live with drafts that don't work and pages that need to be thrown out and explorations whose purpose is not to end up between hardcovers, right? They're to lead us to the better version. They're to rule out choices that don't work. It doesn't mean they didn't do their job. It just, not every word we write is going to end up in the final book. In fact, I will go so far as to say that most of the words you write for any given project will not end up in the final product, right? That's just the work. It's the process. So I think that's what you're referring to there, Angelica. Let me know if it was something else. Let's see. Oh, this is a great one. Let me put it up. It's a long one. I'll just sort of peek above. So a Facebook user loves to tell stories and things. Good at it at dinner parties. Remember those? I do remember dinner parties. I love them. I can't wait to have them again. But let me express some gratitude, because isn't it amazing that we can do this, right? I mean, you're all in my house right now. It's so great. I wish you could really come over. I'll make coffee. We'll kibitz about writing. It's a good thing. So telling stories, the knack for telling stories is a beautiful thing. And then I find myself at a loss creating the same kind of entertainment on the page, making faces, pausing for laughs, and the fun part of stalling seems impossible to translate. Oh, how I love this comment. So I'm going to put this down because I'm so myself petite, you won't be able to see me. All right. So friend Facebook user, I started my career as a storyteller, as an actor. That was my first career as an artist. And I I did it when I was a teen in school, the way a lot of kids do. But I had a very fortunate experience when I was a teenager that I got my professional job in this. So I was able to have a professional job as an actor. I was, from 18 to probably about 10 years. And during that time, I learned so much about storytelling, so much. For the very same reasons that what you're describing. When you are actually trying to convey a narrative, a character, comedy, something that you want to impact an audience, when you have the capacity to use your whole self to express it, you can do a lot of things on automatic. Like if you have a natural sense of storytelling, if you have a sense of timing, if you were blessed with good storytellers in your family, having a grandpa that could really spin a yarn, you learn the rhythms. You learn the rhythms of it. Just the way you learn speech. You learn it by immersion. So if you have been immersed in storytelling, you can recreate that, you know. And my students tease me sometimes because I get very animated. I'm like a Muppet. That's all right. I have a background as a performer, and I love the immediacy of it. If you say something that works, connects with the audience, you can feel it coming back to you right away. You get a laugh, it feels great, right? This is why people get hooked on performing. It's why comedians get hooked on doing stand-up. Like the satisfaction of that feedback is hard to replicate. When we want to do it on the page, this is where writing craft really helps us, because we have to recreate those very dynamics. Comedy, for example, like you use the word entertainment, pausing for laughs, all that stuff. The rhythm of language is something that we get to control. As writers, we get to decide how fast something is told. We get to decide whether we make the reader wait a little bit before we give them the punchline. We can use words to recreate that experience of timing. And in fact, that is one of the writing craft topics that we have to explore in revision, is the rhythm of the prose, right? The timing of the reveals. We can have long sentences. We can have short sentences. We can have long paragraphs. We can have short paragraphs. We can use long words. We can use short words. That all sounds very rudimentary, but when you sit down to work with a professional mindset as a writer, none of those choices are accidental. You are making choices. I want to mix up the rhythm there in a very suspenseful moment. You might want, like in the Matrix, to slow down the bullet, right? You might want to create an experience where it feels like time is slowing down. You have a lot of control over the reader because they are reading word by word, left to right. So once you realize that, you have the reins of what happens. If it takes an entire page of prose for 1 second to pass, because something so extraordinarily dramatic is going on, that time seems to slow down, and your main character is having one of those experiences, right, where time stops and they're, able to take in the way they say major league, baseball players, they can see the ball moving in slow motion. Like if they're in a zone, you can play with time that way by deploying language consciously to do it. So it's a really cool observation that you make. The making faces, pausing for laughs, and the fun part of storytelling. It was something that was really a learning curve for me when I made the transition from being a performer to being a writer. And the transitional practice that moved me. I mean, I always wrote. I don't want to pretend that I didn't write at all. I was always a somewhat adept writer. As a kid, I was a good writer in school. So it wasn't that I was never thought about writing, but I had no ambition to be a writer until I was in my late 20s. And the practice that transitioned me from just thinking that performing was it, for the very reasons that you described so well, was that I explored comedy improv, and which kind of combines the invention of writing. It's up to you. What you improvise is up to you. You're in control of the situation. Stimulus comes at you from the audience, suggestions, whatever, and then you create it on the spot. And what improv often do is they take the that get made up based on when I did improv, it really woke me up to the fact that there's no bottom to the capacity to make things up. And that inventing was where my keenest pleasure came from. And that if I could learn to do that with consistency, create this bond with the audience or the reader, that would be the path that I wanted to be on, for my life. So that's, a little part of my life story, but I just love what you said. All right. Yeah, Angelica has clarified her comment. It's hard to believe that you don't have to do every single issue that needs to be fixed in the same single revision. Oh, it's so, so important to really believe that. You must believe it. It's simply not possible. It's an unrealistic expectation to think that you're going to write a draft, revise a draft, and boom, done. There's just too many different angles to look at. There's too many things to look at. You can do a whole revision just on dialogue. Just say, I'm just going to go over the whole thing and make sure all the dialogue is as good as it can. And then you have to have some metrics to apply. Like, what makes dialogue good? We can have a whole conversation about that, and I promise that we will on another day. What makes dialogue good? You have to be able to say, well, I know what makes dialogue good. I'm looking for these qualities in my work. I'm looking to make sure that I've, put into practice what I know about writing craft as it comes to dialogue, whether it's keeping things concise, not getting lost in the false belief that dialogue on the page should realistically replicate speech. In life, when we speak, we're always going off topic and using a lot of dialogue on the page is a kind of beautiful, perfect of real speech. It's not real speech. Dialogue on the page must move story forward. It is not a conversation break from the story. It's not water cooler time. Oh, let's just go chat for a while. Let's let my characters chat for a while, before, dialogue is so wonderful to work in. And I'm just using that as an example. Because, as readers, when you're in a book and the author has lost, you've taken the keys back from the author. They've lost deep engagement, right? You're not as engaged as you were. There's a piece of the book that is just not grabbing you right now, and you feel yourself getting foggy. You're not engrossed. So you have to work a little harder to pay attention. And if you really start to feel like, I'm not sure I can get through the rest of this chapter. It's not, I don't know, for having me. What do? We turn the page ahead, like one or two, to see if there's dialogue. If dialogue is coming back, we're like, people are talking again. Socially tired that if someone addresses us, we're like, what? We perk up, we listen, we ignore people. Dialogue in books has this quality of being able to magically snap the reader's attention back. It's a really important craft topic. We got to go back and get our dialogue really working for us. It's catnip to the reader. But so many things. One of you might do a whole revision of a book, just making sure that your descriptions are both sufficiently with sensory detail and specific to keep that hypnotized, fully immersed in the world of your story, but not overdone to the point where it starts to feel like a laundry list of generic details where you're just describing the room, weather, describing. We do these things in drafts because we're working it out. We're inventing. It's good to just throw in the draft. If you prematurely decide that you want your early drafts to read like a finished book, here's the risk you run. Your process of invention, because you're going to immediately see that you're just inventing all kinds of things that are not important enough to keep. And so you're going to say, okay, this isn't right. I'm overdoing it. And then what have you done? Like, you have put a cork in your own body, haven't you? Right. I think sometimes when people experience what they call writer's block, this is what's happening. Writer's block topic for another day. But I will tell you in brief that I don't believe in it. And writer's block for most writers is just a collision with some misunderstanding about writing craft. It's pretty easy to fix. There's a comment again from Angelica. Yeah, we writers, we specialize in unrealistic expectations. So when your unrealistic expectation hits reality, it's got to give. Either you have to be willing to put down your expectation, or if you're not willing, you're just going to be stuck because there is no way to proceed. You have thought there was a door, walked up to it. It is just a wall. Either you deal with the fact that it's a wall, or you are just going to stand there saying, well, I think it's a door. I'm going to stand here until it turns into a door. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. We have to put down our unrealistic expectations. We have to be willing to learn. And here's another point. I'm going to wrap this up. And so anybody who's got any more questions at all about what I've said, or questions of your own about revision, this would be a great time to post them so I can look at them before I wrap us up for today. What was I going to say? I had a really good thing to end with. It was something really good. we have to. It was about unrealistic expectations. Oh gosh, here it is. Here is what I wanted to say. It's a little heavy, so that's why I was resisting it a little bit. Anybody who cares enough about writing to be watching this video, right, has a sense of themselves already as a writer. I know you do. I know you feel this way about yourselves, and you should, because the love of storytelling, the love of good writing, the desire, the ambition to want to do it, to want to be one of the magicians that can make that happen, that can create those beautiful objects between hardcovers, that cause these magical, emotional, life-changing experiences in the minds of others. Who wouldn't want that job? It is amazing, right? So you already have a sense of yourself as being on this path, being drawn to it, really wanting to be good at it. And hopefully, I hope you feel that you have a knack for it. I don't mean to say that lightly, that you're attracted to it. You wouldn't be attracted to it if you didn't have some kind of, if it didn't resonate with you somehow. So it is part of your identity. It's something that even if you don't tell other people, it's something that you feel about yourself. I am a writer. Maybe I'm still finding my way. Maybe I haven't cracked it yet, but I am a writer. And that is a very, very significant part of who I feel I am at the deepest level. And now you've got to deal with the fact that you have a lot to learn, the fact that your first drafts might not be that great, the fact, it's your identity, and yet you put it out into the world and you go, but it's not there yet. I mean, that is a tremendous challenge to our sense of self. Anything that comes at us and shakes our sense of identity really feels fraught. It could feel like an attack. We could get very defensive. I see this sometimes happen, not often with my students, because my students tend to be amazing. But I have seen it happen where a writer, who is given feedback or given notes, or, encounters resistance, say, from the industry. People don't jump up and sign them for a book deal the way they think. They get really angry. The answer is not like, oh no, I have more work to do. The answer is angry. Oh, they don't know. It's a bunch of hooey, right? The anger comes up. That's just defensiveness. That's just the defending against that identity wound of like, oh, but I'm a writer. How could this not be working? With this, is there something wrong with me? Am I wrong about who I am? It's a very profound risk, psychological risk taking. So I'm just naming it. I can't make it go away, but I'm just naming it, that if you have this sense of somebody said something funny, talker's block. I had a moment of talker's block, right? It's amazing. That if you have this sense of like, oh, but I really judge myself harshly. I get into the revision process. I don't, it feels so fraught. Just look at the underneath of that. Like, just really dig down like one more level and say, yes, but I am a writer. I am. None of this changes the fact that this is my passion. This is what I do. I am at whatever stage of the journey I'm at. And that is the exactly perfect place for me to be right now. You cannot be further down the path than you are. Wherever you are is where you need to be. And all I encourage you to do is to stay as open as you can. Because if you can stay open to learning, to feedback, to exploration, you will make fast progress. If you are that person standing in front of the wall saying, I'm going to stand here till it turns into a door, you're not going to make fast progress, right? And the mental constructs that you might manufacture to save yourself are not going to help you. You're going to get angry at imaginary blockades that you think the industry or other people, whatever, are putting in your way, or you're going to start to be mad at yourself for wasting all this time on writing. It's like, no, be nice to yourself. You might need to learn some things. You might need more patience. It's okay. There's a lot of information out there. And I'd like to say there's people like me who've been doing this for a long time with a certain degree of accomplishment. And it is a pleasure and an honor for me to try to translate some of what I've learned the hard way for you guys, to try to save you time. I have been, mentored at many key moments in my life. And I'm grateful for it. And I wouldn't have the opportunities, to be talking about this stuff with you guys today if that were not the case. So let me do that for you as best I can. All right. So if we have any more questions, let me just do no, I think we're good. All right. So I know next week is a holiday week. And this week was a holiday week too. Happy Hanukkah for those who observe. I myself made a big batch of latkes over the weekend, and they were delicious. And those of you who are celebrating the Christmas holiday, have a Merry Christmas. And those of you who are celebrating the solstice, have a wonderful solstice. I do think right now that I'm going to be available to do this again next week, even though it's a holiday week. So check on Facebook, check on YouTube. A great way to know whether what's coming up next is to subscribe to the YouTube channel and ding the bell so you get a notification. If you want to join the Facebook group, it is Path of the Storyteller, and this, live stream goes to both places. So if you're connected to one of those two, that's great. And of course, the best thing of all is to make sure you're on my mailing list, which you can get on at pathofthestoryteller.com. Just join the list and you'll get the notifications from me in your inbox. All right. So I thank you for joining me this time around. It's been a fun talk about revision. So much of our work, just like anybody's work, is mindset, right? So much of it is mindset. Writing craft is super important, but we have to be in a mental framework that allows us to learn it and make use of it, right? So we've got to get it all together. That's what I've got for today, guys. Thanks so much for spending the time. I'll see you next time.